Adana lived in the bustling center of Lagos, Nigeria. She was a hard-working woman who valued every naira she earned. With the inheritance left by her late father, she purchased a house and poured her energy into renovating it. To her, it was more than just a home. It was the foundation of a future she dreamed of building with her husband, Chick. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect couple. Chick was handsome, witty, and knew how to keep people laughing. But beneath that charm, he was reckless with money. He was drawn to risky ventures and quick cash schemes, leaving Adana to shoulder the true responsibilities that kept their lives afloat. Quietly, she carried the heavier load, paying bills, managing the household, and even sending support to Chick's family. Instead of receiving gratitude, she faced arrogance and pride. Chick began staying out late, returning reeking of alcohol and clinging to the belief that a man is the head of the home. His mother, Mama Kechi, only made things worse. She never missed a chance to belittle Adana, accusing her of failing to show her son proper respect, even though Adana gave far more than she ever received. One stormy night, the cracks finally split wide open. In front of his mother, Kechi, and his brothers, Chick lashed out, shouting that Adana was useless and a burden. His words boomed louder than the rain outside. Before she could defend herself, he dragged her suitcase, hurled it into the storm, and slammed the door shut. Drenched, humiliated, and heartbroken, Adana walked away without protest. She found shelter at her cousin's home, where she was reminded of something Chick had overlooked. The deed of the house carried her name. That paper was her strength, her proof, her key. The very next day, while Chick drank with friends and celebrated what he thought was freedom, Adana's lawyer delivered an eviction notice. His pride crumbled when he realized the truth. The house had always belonged to her. Whispers spread through the neighborhood. Everyone spoke of the man who threw out the rightful owner. His family abandoned him, and his mistress vanished the moment hardship arrived. By the 7th day, Adana returned, not with rage but with quiet dignity. Accompanied by security, she reclaimed her home while Chick fell to his knees begging. Calmly, she told him the house would only shelter those who honored it. Watching him haul his belongings into the street, stripped of pride, became her final closure. Months later, Adana transformed part of the home into rental units for single mothers. Standing firm, she became a reminder to everyone that no one should ever be cast out of what they built with their own hands. All along, it had been Adana paying most of the bills, sending support to Chick's family, and keeping the house afloat. Yet Chick carried himself as though he provided everything. He spent his nights drinking and boasting, brushing her off with the words, "A man is the head of the home." Each time, the phrase cut deeper, for Adana knew it was her sacrifices that held everything together while his pride only grew. Mama Kechi poured salt into the wounds. She visited often, but her words were filled with venom. She criticized Adana's cooking, her manners, even the way she spoke. To anyone who would listen, she painted Adana as a disrespectful wife. Adana endured in silence, swallowing the pain, but her heart grew heavier with each insult. Chick never once defended her. He stood with his mother, nodding along as Adana's sacrifices went unseen. The house became unbearable. Adana's long, hard days ended only in coldness and blame. Chick dressed sharply, stayed out later, and ignored her questions. Neighbors whispered after spotting him with other women, but he dismissed everything with arrogance. Alone at night, Adana wondered if love was meant to feel this heavy. She prayed for change, hoping patience might open his eyes, but instead his pride swelled further. He bragged to his friends about being in control, while Mama Kechi repeated her mantra, "Respect keeps a marriage." But what she meant was blind obedience, not partnership. Adana's voice shrank within her own home, her kindness mistaken for weakness. The distance between them widened. He carried himself like a king, but it was her sacrifices that kept food on the table and lights burning. Outwardly she smiled, but inside she was breaking. The love she had poured into her marriage had become a burden she carried alone, while her husband and his mother stood by without care. The storm within the house was only beginning, and her silence was the fragile thread holding it together. Then came the night everything shattered. Thunder rumbled outside as voices clashed inside. Chick stood in the living room, face twisted with rage, pointing at Adana as if she were a stranger. He called her useless, a burden, his words slicing through her like knives. This time, the cruelty wasn't behind closed doors. It was delivered in front of his mother and brothers, who watched with smug approval. The rain hammered the windows, but the storm inside was fiercer. Mama Ketchy folded her arms, a cold smile of victory on her face, while Chick's brothers smirked at her humiliation. Tears welled in Adana's eyes as she struggled to comprehend how the man she had built her life with could treat her like an enemy. Her silence only enraged him further. His shouting shook the walls as he ordered her out of his house. Before she could respond, he seized her suitcase, dragged it to the door, and flung it into the rain. The thud echoed through the night as her clothes spilled into the mud, soaked within seconds. He slammed the door, locked it, and walked away without a glance. Adana stood outside, her hair plastered to her face, her body trembling from the cold rain and the raw sting of betrayal. Neighbors peered from their windows, whispering as they watched her abandoned in the storm. For a moment, the world felt frozen. She had given her heart, her money, her strength to that home, only to be discarded like she was nothing. Slowly, she bent to gather her muddy suitcase and walked away. She did not scream. She did not beg. She did not fight back. Her quiet dignity spoke louder than his rage. Raindrops mixed with her tears, but her silence carried the weight of her broken heart. That night marked her deepest wound, but also the birth of a strength she had never known. She walked into the darkness of Lagos, each step heavy, her clothes soaked, her spirit crushed. The rain hid her tears, but the pain of betrayal burned inside. She had been cast out of the very home she built. Yet she did not turn back. She carried nothing but sorrow and the small suitcase he had thrown into the mud. At last, she reached her cousin's home, her safe refuge, and the first step toward reclaiming her power. When Afoma opened the door and found Adana shivering, soaked from the rain, she immediately drew her inside without speaking. The warmth of the home surrounded her, yet Adana couldn't hold back the storm inside her heart. She sat in silence, eyes fixed on the floor, replaying every cruel word Chick had hurled at her. Ioma clasped her hand gently, staying beside her until her tears ran dry. By morning, when the skies had cleared, Ioma spoke to her with calm determination. She reminded Adana of who she truly was. "You are stronger than you realize," she said firmly, her gaze steady. "The deed is in your name. Don't let them destroy you." Those words sparked something deep within Adana. The house Chick boasted of was never his. She had purchased it with her inheritance, paid for every improvement, and her name alone was written on the documents. Listening to Ioma, Adana felt the weight of despair begin to lift. She understood how long she had allowed their voices to drown out her worth. The humiliation of that night had broken her, yet it also revealed her hidden strength. Her thoughts grew sharper, no longer those of a cast-out wife, but of a rightful owner who had been dishonored. Ioma urged her to act, reminding her that silence was not weakness. It was strength waiting for the right moment. Adana wiped her tears, straightened her back, and for the first time since that stormy night, felt a quiet fire awaken inside her. This wasn't her ending, it was the beginning of her fight for dignity. With her cousin by her side, she began planning her next steps, ones that would change everything. The following morning, as the memory of the storm still lingered, Chick filled the house with friends, throwing what he proudly called a celebration. Music blared, bottles crowded the table, and laughter echoed through the rooms. He ridiculed Adana's departure, boasting to his guests that he had freed himself of a burden. Raising his glass high, he declared himself free to live however he wished. As the drinks flowed, his arrogance grew louder. He bragged about Zara, the woman he had been secretly seeing, claiming she would soon become his wife. Together, he boasted, they would reign over the house he called his own. His friends cheered and slapped his back, fueling his ego. His mother, Ketchy, beamed with pride, believing her son had taken charge of his destiny. But while Chick celebrated, Adana was already moving in silence, fueled by Ioma's encouragement. Her lawyer had drawn up every document, ensuring nothing was overlooked. By the time Chick reveled in his false victory, the law was already working on Adana's side. The next day, when the party's noise had faded, Chick was handed a letter. He tore it open casually, expecting good news. But his face stiffened as his eyes scanned the words. It was an eviction notice, stamped and signed by Adana's lawyer. The paper declared in bold terms that the house was not his, and he and his family had 7 days to leave. His hands shook as he read it again, disbelief flashing across his face. He shouted in fury, demanding answers, but the paper didn't lie. His friends, who had cheered him the day before, exchanged uneasy glances, no longer laughing. The pride he had displayed so loudly now dissolved into fear. The house he had claimed with arrogance had never belonged to him. Adana's name on the deed spoke louder than all his boasts. What he believed to be triumph had turned into the first step of his downfall. Blazing with anger, Chick stormed into the lawyer's office, slamming the eviction notice on the desk and shouting that the house was his. He bellowed that no one had the right to throw him out. The lawyer, calm and composed, opened a file and slid a document across the table. Leaning forward, Chick's eyes fell on the deed. In bold letters stood Adana's name as the sole owner. His mouth went dry. His voice faltered. He read it again and again, desperate for a mistake, but the truth was undeniable. The house had been bought and registered in Adana's name before their marriage. In that instant his pride shattered. The home he had paraded as his own, the very place he had cast his wife out of, was never his to claim. The lawyer's measured words struck deeper than Adana's silence ever had. "You have 7 days to vacate." Chick sank into a chair, his rage collapsing into shock. He had never asked how the house was built, never cared whose money raised its walls. He had assumed it was his right. Now the truth stripped him bare. Ketchy, who had accompanied him, froze with her lips parted, but no words to defend her son. She had proudly mocked Adana, treating her as less. Now she saw clearly. It was Adana who had always held the true power. The lawyer repeated the deadline firmly. 7 days, no more, no less. Chick clenched his fists, but there was nothing he could do. The law stood with Adana, and every signature proved it. Silence thickened in the office, broken only by the ticking of the clock. When they left, Chick's steps dragged with shame. His mother followed behind, her pride swallowed, her head bowed. For the first time, neither had any words to shield themselves. Outside, whispers had already begun. In Lagos, news traveled fast, and the tale of the man who tried to seize his wife's house was spreading quickly. His humiliation had only just begun. Within hours, neighbors gathered outside, murmuring in clusters, pointing at the gates. Lagos was a city where no secret lasted long. The story of Chick throwing out his wife only to discover she owned the house was now on every tongue. Women selling food paused to gossip. Children ran errands while carrying the tale. Men in bars chuckled at his foolishness. Inside, Chick peered through the curtains, every whisper stabbing at his pride. The same neighbors who once praised him now ridiculed his arrogance. How could a man drive out the very woman who gave him a roof? They said. The humiliation burned like fire in his chest. His proud claims of being the head of the home now returned to him as cruel laughter. The shame didn't end there. His brothers, once his allies in cruelty, turned on him in anger. In the living room, they cornered him, shouting furiously. "Because of your pride, we are about to lose the only shelter we have," one roared. Another accused him of chasing after women instead of protecting the home Adana had built. Their voices clashed in rage, heavy with blame. Ketchy, usually quick to speak, sat wordless in the corner, her face pale. She could not defend her son, not when the truth was clear. Every whisper from outside pierced her pride as much as his. Her neighbors, who once held her in esteem, now mocked her in whispers. The shame clung not only to her son but to her own name. Chick tried to shout back at his brothers, but his voice had lost its power. His words came out thin and weak, smothered by their rage and the laughter outside. He felt the house pressing in on him. The very walls he had once claimed were his, now slipping from his control. His pride, once loud and unshakable, had crumbled beneath the weight of truth. To the community, he was no longer the man he pretended to be, but a fool undone by his own arrogance. By the 7th day, the street outside was already packed with watchful faces. Neighbors gathered silently, waiting for the outcome. The air was tense, buzzing with hushed conversations that spread like fire. Then a black car rolled to a stop, and Adana stepped out. She was no longer the soaked figure who had walked away in the rain. She stood tall, calm, and steady. Beside her were uniformed guards and a court officer carrying official documents. The crowd murmured, moved by the quiet strength she carried. The moment Taikik saw her, he rushed out. His once proud shoulders had sagged, and his arrogant tone had turned into a shaky plea. In front of everyone, he stretched out his hands and begged, "You are my wife. Forgive me. Let's put this right." His desperate voice, however, fell flat to the ears of neighbors who had witnessed his cruelty only a week before. Adana met his gaze with calm, unreadable eyes. She neither raised her voice nor showed fury. Instead, her quiet words cut deeper than any shout. "This house shelters only those who honor it. You did not." Her statement drifted through the air, and the crowd nodded. Some even clapped softly, admiration clear on their faces. The court officer stepped forward and delivered the legal order, while the guard stood firm as the crowd leaned in, eager to see the end. Chick's knees gave way, his pride shattered before all. Mama Nkechi appeared at the doorway, her pale face silent, louder than the gossip outside. She could not speak, not when the truth stood so plainly before her. The neighbors watched as Chick begged again, but Adana remained unmoved. Her composure carried more force than any storm. She had not returned with fury but with dignity, and that made her strength undeniable. Soon, people outside began whispering her name with respect, calling her wise and strong. When the final notice was handed over, reality hit hard. Cheikh and his family no longer had a place there. The very walls they claimed were now closing on them forever, and no words could change it. Forced to leave, they dragged their belongings out under the sharp eyes of the community. The street filled with people watching every move, some whispering, others shaking their heads, a few laughing at the once proud man carrying his mattress on his back. Each item removed was another blow to his pride. The neighbors who had once watched him boast now saw him humbled, and none stepped forward to help. Even the children stood at a distance, pointing and giggling as the family stumbled with their scattered possessions. Mama Nkechi, who once spoke with so much fire, walked quietly behind her sons carrying a small bag. She kept her gaze lowered, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Her silence carried the weight of defeat. The family who once treated Adana as nothing now stood stripped of everything. Their shame lay bare for all to see. And at the center of it all, Zara was nowhere. The woman Chick had paraded as his future wife disappeared at the first sign of trouble. She ignored his calls, never returned, and refused to be tied to his disgrace. Her absence cut him deeper than the neighbors' gossip. He realized too late that the woman he sacrificed everything for was never his at all. He stood abandoned, disgraced, and hollow. From a distance, Adana watched in silence as the last of their things were carried out. Her face remained calm, her steps measured, her strength visible to all. She neither shouted nor laughed nor mocked. She simply waited until the house was emptied. The neighbors turned their gaze back to her, admiration written clearly across their faces. Once the court officer confirmed the house was hers alone, Adana stepped forward. She walked through the doorway with the poise of someone who knew her worth. The soft click of the door closing behind her echoed like thunder in Chick's chest. It was the final blow, the end of his arrogance and the start of her new beginning. She had returned not with noise, but with a dignity that spoke louder than words. Months later, Adana's home bore no resemblance to the place she had once been cast out of. Fresh paint brightened the walls, flowers blossomed in the yard, and warmth filled the rooms instead of bitterness. She had poured her strength into giving the house new life, a life that reflected resilience. One section was transformed into rental units for single mothers in need of safety and a fresh start. Women came with their children, carrying stories of struggle, and Adana welcomed them openly. The house that had once seen her pain now overflowed with laughter, hope, and second chances. Adana herself thrived in unexpected ways. She managed her money wisely, ran the rentals with success, and carried herself with quiet confidence that won respect. Neighbors who once whispered about her humiliation now spoke proudly of her strength. They shared her story, telling how she turned betrayal into blessing. She became an example for women who had suffered in silence, proving that life does not end when someone tries to break you. Cheikh's name was rarely spoken anymore. His downfall became a warning, but Adana's rise became an inspiration. Even Mama Nkechi, once arrogant and cruel, avoided the street, unable to face the woman they had tried to ruin. The community now stood with Adana, admiring the way she carried her pain with grace and transformed it into power. One evening, Adana stood at her doorway, watching the tenants' children play in the yard. Their laughter rang through the air, filling her heart with peace. She thought back to that stormy night when she had walked away in the rain, broken and humiliated, and how far she had come since then. Turning toward the audience, her voice calm and steady, she spoke her final words. Never let anyone cast you out of what you built with your own hands. Your strength is greater than their cruelty, and your silence can become your victory. With that, she closed the door softly behind her, the same door she had once been locked out of, now forever hers. A symbol of survival, dignity, and triumph. Hi, my love's red heart. Thank you so much for staying with me to the very end of this story, Cherry Blossom. Don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories. See you next time, Sparkles.